Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Coronavirus, no time for complacency, says NHS England. They are focusing predominantly on quarantine, and I dare say there is another option. Of course, what we're trying to balance at the moment is the economy, which I think is a far too abstract way of talking about it. So when I say economy, what I really mean is individuals who wish to work, they wish to create things, they wish to trade with other people, they wish to make a name for themselves, they wish to provide for their families and their communities, and they wish to have an impact in the world. That is what I mean when I just mention economy. I don't mean GDP, I mean people actually being able to contribute and create things and give meaning to their lives. That is what I'm going for. The economic part of it is secondary, if you will. And balancing that with people not dying, of course, because you can't do those jobs, you can't have that work if there isn't anybody to do it, of course. If there's nobody providing you with what you need in order to do your work, or if there aren't any customers willing to buy what you have to sell, essentially, or willing to trade with you in whatever realm it might be. So, of course, with that, the lives are more important than the economy, of course, no doubt. However, with this virus, it particularly affects people with underlying health conditions. That is predominantly skewed towards older people, of course, seeing as our body shuts down as we get older. The telomeres, which dictate how long you live, essentially, start to cause problems with your body because we're not built for immortality, we're just built to reproduce. And that means natural selection and random mutations can happen, and the successful ones are bred forward in order to make a life form which is more resilient. Every life form just wants to keep itself alive, of course, as we're seeing with coronavirus, trying to keep itself alive. So most likely mutate into one that's more infectious but less deadly. We're hoping so that more people will get it but won't be as affected by it, because then coronavirus can live for as long as it can. Similar to what we seem to be seeing at the moment, that there are two strains. There's a mild and a lethal, essentially, and so anybody who's gone through with the mild symptoms probably has the more infectious but mild form of it, which should, all being well, enable immunity to the deadlier type as well. So in a way, it's sort of created its own vaccine, if you will, because if you get the mild form, you're not really that affected. Okay, you are for a few days, a bit poorly, but it's just like man flu, if you will, whereas that will then stop you from dying from the more lethal case. Seeing as the fatal numbers, or the percentage of fatality, is different in different countries. Germany is about 0.6, in Italy it's over 10%. But in the countries where you have families living together more, and the older people with the children, you seem to see higher death rates, of course. But what I wish to focus on here, with all that ramble out of the way, is because it's the older people who are more affected, people with underlying health conditions. If you've been smoking, of course, that's going to cause scarring on your lungs. The scar tissue, they're not going to work as well. You're going to get emphysema, bronchitis, that kind of thing. Sure, and because COVID-19 is, or the China virus, is a respiratory illness, then it's going to affect those people more, and the longer you smoke, the more affected you're going to be. Therefore, if you're young, you haven't had enough time for smoking to have enough impact to damage you enough for coronavirus to kill you, whereas older people do, of course, and younger people aren't smoking as much as older people did when they were young. Yep. So with that out of the way, what can be done about it? Well, obviously we're trying to do a national quarantine, lockdown, crackdown, coronavirus crackdown, so that nobody can move about, so we don't spread it to anybody else, because you might be a carrier and then spread it to somebody else, and now they're impacted. And of course, as I said before, we want it to spread slowly enough so that hopefully the economy won't be impacted too much. However, it seems like we've just decided, the economy is going to be impacted for the next few weeks at least then, and we're just going to have to try and get through it. The other option is to allow people to get it as they will, and take those few days or week off work as your regular sick pay. And the people who are at higher risk, they quarantine themselves. And I'm sure businesses will be understanding and say, yes, you can work from home, that's fine. you understand the risks, we're going to give you as much information as you can and do what you want. Therefore, government doesn't have to close down businesses and therefore actually pay for them to stay afloat when they can't trade, because they're saying that the businesses can stay open. If people don't wish to go to them, then the businesses might say, okay, people, we've got a cleaning solution in place, so we wipe down everything, we disinfect it all, and even when you come in, we might ask you to put on a hazmat suit of sorts, or whatever it might be. And the companies, of course, we're going to have to take a hit in order for this to be, for us to stay open, because we've got to put these precautions in place, but it's going to be more beneficial. And of course, then you'll find the ones that change and keep up to date with the impact of coronavirus will stay open, and the government won't have to try and bail people out, because people will make their own choices. And then the government can clean their hands of it. If some sectors are more impacted by it because people don't wish to be out, because of course you don't have to force people out, but at the moment they're forcing people in, then that is something that they will have to deal with themselves. Of course, at the moment we're seeing the bigger companies recruiting far more people, like Asda and Tesco and Walmart in America, and Amazon, of course, recruiting hundreds of thousands of people across the board, because there's more demand for those bigger shops that can do the deliveries, that have the supply chains in place, that aren't so affected by the social distancing, unlike the smaller businesses, which of course are now going belly up. As is always the case, the government protects the bigger businesses because of lobbying. But we've got the examples of the older people who are saying, well, hey, why keep us, basically? And Dan Patrick, who's been slammed, of course, for trying to say, as himself, as someone who's nearly 70, saying we don't have to ruin the economy for the sake of us. The old people, if we think we're at risk, we will take ourselves into isolation. We don't think that we need to go out, that's fine. And Dan Patrick himself, as I say, as a old guy himself, nearly a septuagenarian, saying, well, I've got 6 grandchildren, I want the economy to do well for them. I don't think we should all have to suffer for something that I might be affected by, essentially. So he's wishing people to be able to get on with their lives, and then people who would be at risk to quarantine themselves as they see fit, because it's the older people who don't need to go out so much anyway. And he said he's willing to sacrifice himself as well as the other grandparents he knows, because as any good father would, they're willing to sacrifice themselves and what they have in order for a greater prosperity for their children and to put them into the world in a good way. That is what we see families doing, parents doing, almost every single generation, that they want their children to be better off than they were. And Dan Patrick is just an example of that. Of course, he's getting slated for it because it's political hackery, but nonetheless, that's his slant. And he's not saying that you have to kill off old people, not at all. He's saying that they can quarantine themselves and then you don't have to squash the economy. And then similarly here from the Washington Post, we've got them coming up with a story of a gentleman who just sent out a tweet that nobody really noticed until they picked it up, of course. And the headline is, he urged saving the economy over protecting those who are not productive from the coronavirus. Then he faced America's wrath. Misleading headline, what do we expect? And we have them cleaning the New York Stock Exchange. So it's Scott McMillan who had the audacity, if you will, to say the fundamental problem is whether we're going to tank the entire economy to save 2.5% of the population, which is 1, generally expensive to maintain, and 2, not productive. So old people are already expensive and they're not producing enough. Therefore, seeing as we're having to pay them and support them, and now we're suffering even more, should we still continue to have to do that? What was the Washington Post response? Of course, they tracked down his parents. They go, well, we're going to tell your parents. What did they find out when they did that? They found out that Scott McMillan himself actually takes good care of his parents, and he's ensuring that he can help out with whatever they need through the quarantine time. And his parents, how did they respond to it? He said, well, yes, I think what he said is fair enough. It's not the nicest way of saying it, of course, but nonetheless, he does say it, as they mention here. they quote, "They've been especially not productive since February 23rd, which is the last time they left their house in San Diego, when Gloria and her friends went to see the Los Angeles Opera perform Eurydice," just to try and rub it in a bit more. So the parents said, especially the dad, is saying that Jim said he's fine with television, internet, and cell phones. "That's enough for me, man. I only put 900 miles on my car a year anyway, so this isn't that different for me." He's saying it's the old people who don't have to go out that means that they're not actually that affected. And of course, the Washington Post wishes to try to drag anyone down who disagrees. But nonetheless, it's older people who are saying, well, we want a better life for our children and our grandchildren, and we don't have to go out that much anyway. So don't tank the entire economy and stop people from doing things just for our sake. We'd rather it was better on for our children and grandchildren. And on top of that, just as a nice little boon to end with, because we like ending on a high note, what we've got here from Mr. Chalmer said insolvency rules would be changed to allow firms greater flexibility as they face the coronavirus crisis. Got to keep them ticking over. And he added that a range of measures to boost the supply of personal protective equipment, such as face masks to protect frontline NHS staff, were also being introduced. And how is that? Because red tape would be reduced to allow new producers of hand sanitizer to bring products to market in a matter of days, he said. Yes, this red tape, this safety testing, all this legislation which apparently is done to keep us safe, that apparently when actually push comes to shove and we need it and they can't be seen to continue their lobbying antiques, then they're going to cut it and say, okay, yeah, cool, we're going to stop you having to jump through these hurdles, just get it out, we're going to help you out. Because they're saying that if we keep it below 20,000 deaths, then we're doing well. And it's optimistic. But hey, red tape is lifted. So with all this police state talk and people concerned about the army coming in and cracking down on our free lives, not as free as it once was, it's nice to see that, hey, at least in one way, red tape has been lifted. If we can see this extrapolated out to other areas as well, then we might come out of it actually with a bit more freedom than we did going in. So, hope that's a nice start to your weekend, and until next time, have a good one.